What is up, guys? In this video, we're going to be adding start and game over labels to our game. So to start, let's go into our game scene file. Let's go down to the bottom of the load functions, and we're going to do the start label first. So let's put in load start label here for this function. And we're going to be using a class called SKLabelNode. It's part of SpriteKit. It's like SKSpriteNode, except you can use it to put in text and different fonts and things like that for your node. So I'm going to say let tap to start label equal SKLabelNode. And this has a constructor that has text as a parameter. The text you put in here is just going to be the text that's contained within the label node. So I'm just going to put tap to start. You guys are welcome to switch it up, obviously change it. I encourage you to change or manipulate any parts of the game because that will actually help you learn better and quicker. So we're going to we're just going to set the position of our tap to start label. The default font and font size actually happens to be a pretty decent font. And you'll see it as soon as we run it after we add this to our scene. So tap to start label dot position. For the position, we want this to be kind of centered on our scene, but a little bit above the ground. So because SKLabelNodes are positioned from the center, we can say frame.size.width over 2, and that will horizontally center it. And frame.size.height over 2 will vertically center it, plus 60, just to get it a little bit over that ground. One more property before we add this to our scene is going to be the name property. We haven't used this before. This is going to be another way that we access it from other functions. So the things that we've been doing previously is we just put variables as properties at the top of our classes in order to access them in multiple functions. Labels aren't really necessarily like a property of our scene. It's not a really important variable. So instead we can just put a name to it, and there's a function we can call later which will access this node. So last but not least, let's add this to our scene. Add tap to start label, and we can also be sure to put this load function in here, the load start label, in our did move to view to make sure that's actually called. Awesome. So we have this cool tap to start label right here. When we tap, it doesn't go away. So that's going to be the next thing that we do right now. So in our start function, this is when we want to grab our label and make it disappear. So the function I was talking about earlier about grabbing this guy with this name is going to be called child node with name. So we can say let tap to start label. And so this is going to contain the label we just created in the load method. We can use child node with name tap to start label. So this child node with name method and function is part of every single node type and also scene classes. So we can call that, if say for instance we had like a square and in that square we added a circle, the way to access that circle would be to call square.childNodeWithName. So you always need to call it on the parent node. So now that we have that grabbed, we can say tap to start label. And we can call this function called remove from parent. So this is essentially the opposing function to add child, and that's just going to remove it from the scene. And the reason we have this exclamation mark here is because child node with name, this function returns an optional value, so it's not sure if tap to start label actually exists. This exclamation mark just tells Xcode, don't worry, we know this exists, call this function on it. So now we have this. If we run this guy, as soon as we tap on the screen, the tap to start label disappears, and awesome, it's exactly what we want. So we're going to do a similar thing for the game over label. Let's copy all of this in the load start label function. And let's go down to our game over function. We can put in a quick comment saying game over label or like load game over label. and paste that in there. Now we basically just have to make a few adjustments. So for tab to start, we're going to just say game over label instead. I'm going to copy this game over bit, and I'm just going to paste it in at all these points that we need to change. We actually don't need to manipulate the game over label name property. We can actually just delete this because the way in which we restart our scene, we just restart and create a new scene. We don't actually have to access the game over label to remove it after it's added to our scene. So we want it to have the same position. The text is just going to be game over in all caps. And that should be pretty good. Let's try running this and see. Let's see how that works. So we have tab to start. We tap. We're jumping, run in, game over. Awesome. Then if we tap again, it's going to restart. Tap to start label is going to be back. And we should be good on those two labels.